Welcome everyone to Melfuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about Severance Season 2 Episode 2. It's called Goodbye Mrs. Selvig. So spoilers for the episode as always. This was all outy, right? Which I'm not surprised at, because episode 1 being all inny, it felt like episode 2 had to be, here's the other side of those cliffhangers. Here's what happened on the outside world. And of course, almost everything that was said about the outside world to Mark and the others in the past episode was all pretty much nonsense. There was no, reform or anything happening. It was cover up. It was this, it was that. This was great though. This was a fantastic episode for a number of reasons. Just lots of little things in how the characters like question certain things, process certain things. Obviously, Milch, like going around doing damage control was one of the most fascinating things about the whole episode. I think Milch and Helena, outy Helly, right? I'll start trying to call her Helena just to make it easy. I think their scenes in this episode are kind of wonderful, right? I mean, not just because Milchick reminded me of the biker alien from Under the Skin when he got on his motorbike. I don't know, it really reminded me of that. If you've not seen that movie, there's an alien character who's like disguised as a biker, and there's lots of shots of him riding around with his sort of black helmet on. And Milchick was giving me a lot of those vibes in this episode, particularly when he sort of walked in and sort of placed the helmet down on the table next to him and stuff like that. But no, it's fascinating that we get to see a little bit of who all these people are on the outside now. Because, in the first season, we didn't really get to see who the outside version of Irvin or Dylan were. We got these little teases of like what their lives were like in the outside. But even that, we didn't really get to see till the very end of the show. Dylan was a bit earlier, but the other, Irvin and certainly Helly was kind of a final episode thing. And even then, it wasn't meeting the real person. It was the outie just sort of being in the situation that the outie is normally in. So this is it presents a really easy thing for them to do. And this is not to try and belittle the decision here, but the obvious thing, the correct choice is that with season 2 of this show, we start to actually get to know more of the outside versions of the characters. It's just an obvious way to expand and make us care more about them. And I think Helly specifically, in comparison to Mark, there's some interesting parallels that I want to talk about. But I'll start with the Milchick stuff, because what I really liked about the Milchick stuff, well, it's a number of things, really. It was kind of the ways that he was trying to manipulate people. Like, obviously, he goes to fire both Dylan and Irvin, and that's, what it is on its own, and they're kind of hit hard by that news. But when he goes to see Mark, I think it's very interesting that all of a sudden, when there's the hints that Mark might not come back to the company, that he wants to leave, and obviously by the end we kind of like find out that Mark's really important to the company. More thoughts on that in a bit. But Milchick actually tries to kind of invert the Severance kind of like attitude. What I mean by this is that he tries to guilt out a Mark by saying, hey, your innie's been doing really well, he's happy, he's got all these things, he's a good employee. I'd hate to reward him with non-existence. He basically puts the guilt onto outy Mark, that he'd be killing this other version of himself by not going back. He tries to just seed that guilt in, and I thought that was a really good little thing, which was malicious, right? A lot of this manipulation is super malicious, but that one really stuck out to me, and I really enjoyed that. My favorite part of that scene, though, when he comes, because this is at the sister's house, Devon's house, with the brother-in-law and all that. When he comes in, Devon just stares daggers at him. Doesn't like. Obviously, there was always a bit of an undercurrent to Milchick, right? Because there was always like a fakeness to how nice he was being to everyone. He's the company man. That was a thing all of season 1. But there was kind of an effort to try and play along just for the sake of we're the employees, and you just sort of do that. Devon does not try to be civil. She doesn't try to put on a false face, especially given what she's just heard from Any Mark from the season finale of 1, where Any Mark was out talking to her and saying a bunch of stuff. like her attitude here, and her she doesn't want to really answer Milch's questions. This stuff is really fascinating, and it kind of also went down this path right before he arrived, where I was really excited by the conversation that the three of them were having. Mark, Devon, and the brother-in-law. That was his name, Rickon. Rickon? I don't even remember that from season 1, but yeah, I remember the character, but I just don't remember him being called Rickon. Right? But they're having a conversation about what Mark said, right? And they kind of like try to hand wave it as, oh, he just meant the baby. She's alive, meant the baby. But it's Devon who's kind of hung up on it and doesn't want to just wave it away like that. She kind of wants to fixate on it a bit more and like ask some questions. And I think what was so fascinating to me about that was that despite the fact that Devon's been very anti-Severance, right, for all of season 1, like Mark even references it in this episode, that she'd been saying, hey, quit that job, it's horrible what they've done to you, this Severance thing's unethical, blah, 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 blah. She'd said all those things, she has those feelings. She cares about her brother, right? And that was a big thing in season 1. She was there for him, she was setting him up on a date with this other woman, she is always looking out for him, she's like his one family member that he's got, so she really tries to be in his life, and it's all very sweet and all these things, right? Devon's a really likable character in a lot of ways. And I think what was so fascinating about this is that her having this experience at the end of season 1 where she got to meet the innie Mark is, I think it's kind of wild to me that possibly the biggest supporter innie Mark has, maybe not including the other innies who know him day to day, is now Devon. Because Devon has now met this other version of her brother and heard him be sort of scared. Like, you know, he said, hey, we're being controlled and it's kind of like torture, or you know, we like everything he said to her painted like a picture of he's in trouble. And while it's not exactly the brother she knows in the outside world, it's still her brother. And it's still him. And she saw him be vulnerable in a way, and and the way that outside Mark never admits that he actually needs help. Like, it's almost like she has to reach out and kind of like force the family socializing on him, force the bonds, because he won't keep them up, and she has to kind of put in the effort to make sure he has that, because he won't do it himself. Any Mark was asking for help. He was basically begging for help. She saw that, and I think it's so fascinating now that while it's Milchek who's sort of making that thinly veiled threat of your innie will be effectively killed if you don't go back to work, you're ending a person's life in a way because it's all he knows, there's some truth to it in the sense that I think now Devon is going to sympathize with innie Mark and is going to see innie Mark as someone who also needs help and is maybe deserving of saving. Obviously, the answer to this eventually is the merger of the two, and both get to sort of come together and exist as one. But in the state that we're in now, the idea that Devon now cares about innie Mark as well as outie Mark, and she can't shake it because she saw him be vulnerable and need the help, I think is, especially when outie Mark never admits that he wants help, I think there's something specifically there that's going to like keep that kind of idea alive. And that's throughout the episode. She wants to talk to Mark, and she wants to talk about, hey mate, can we talk about why you said she's alive? And to be fair, Mark has some good reasons for you know, not taking this seriously. First and foremost, he identified her body when she died. He brings that up, and he gets, you know, kind of defensive when this all comes out. He talks about smelling her smell in the sheets for weeks. He talks about telling her parents that she's dead. He went through this traumatic thing. And again, there's a sense of irony here because she wants to fixate in this and he doesn't. He wants to say, hey, she's dead. But and the weird thing is that he's been the one putting off healing by doing the Severance thing in the first place. It's even reminded us in this episode that his motivation mainly was because he just hated his days. He wanted to forget that his wife existed, and that's why he kind of agreed to it in the first place. So that's kind of great to me as well. But her poking the bear and him having good rebuttals to everything she says, and because I was thinking early on, one of the most exciting things I think she said in the first scene that they have together where they're debating it, well, you know, why did you say she's alive? There's a moment where she starts to sort of say, oh, let's walk through what you did, what innie Mark did, and they talk about, oh, going in there and picking up this photograph. Clearly innie Mark saw this photograph and was interested in it and fascinated by it. And I was begging them to ask the question, why would any Mark see her and be drawn to her? Now, admittedly, there is a good explanation that isn't what the explanation is. The good explanation that you could justify it with is that, well, he's innie and he doesn't know if his outside self has a wife, right? Because that's a conversation that we even get reminded of in this episode, where Mark and Helly kind of joked about, oh, do you think we've got, marriages on the outside? Hey, we could be married to each other on the outside and we wouldn't even know. So it makes sense that he would see a wedding photo with himself in it. He recognizes himself, and that's why he'd be looking at the photo. So they could discount it. But I got really excited when Devon started saying, hey, why did he pick up this photo? Why did he keep it in his hand and want to do something with it? Why did he want to say what he said holding this photograph? That was exciting to me. Because it was kind of like, you get why they're not going to get to the answer, because it's a lot for the characters to jump to, but it's the right questions. It's the right questions. And I was just hoping that the suggestion would come up that somehow any Mark recognizes her, and how could he recognize her? In what possible circumstance would he recognize her? And that, they almost get in there to ask that question, but not quite. It was a great cock tease, basically. It was it works. It works that they didn't get there. I believe that they didn't, and it makes sense that they didn't. But they were just skirting on the line, and it was really satisfying. So, or unsatisfying, but in a good way. Anyway. So I really love that. That's the sort of stuff that gets my brain going and tickled and whatnot. And from there, obviously, Milch comes to see him again and convinces him to come back to work. I'm just sticking with Mark just now. I'll go back and talk about the others. Because Mark, doesn't want to go back, right? They've got the guy, what's his name? Mr. Drummond is spying on him when he's having his conversation with Devon at the diner. And he reports to his bosses, because we see a bit more of Helena. We see Milch, they're having these conversations. And he's like, yeah, he doesn't want to come back. And the subject comes up that he has to come back. We have to convince him to come back. I thought they said Gold Harbor, but I believe the internet has told me on a quick check that it was Cold Harbor. Project Cold Harbor, whatever that is. I have some thoughts. But they need him for that. Which basically recontextualizes that whatever's going on in that floor, it's all about him. It's all about him. The others putting in their numbers or whatever might be completely irrelevant. It's just what he's doing that matters. And it's probably tied directly to the fact that it's about his dead wife. So here's the thing. Here's the thought I had. Because I couldn't shake the feeling, particularly in the diner scene when Mark's talking about identifying her body and all this stuff. And I remember even myself feeling back in season 1 when they revealed with the photograph who his wife was, that, oh, I don't know if I like this reveal that she's alive. Here's what I think now. I don't think that she is technically alive. I think that she died, as she was said to have done. And I think what's happening on the floor, on the Severance floor, is that they basically brought her back, but as an innie, right? The idea that her outie died with her, but they were able to retroactively do the Severance stuff after her death and bring her back. And maybe what Mark is doing is helping fill in parts of who she is to possibly eventually be a full person. They might be trying to achieve immortality here, which, I mean, rich old men, that's what they all want to do, right? And Egan seems pretty intimidating here, which will pivot as nicely into Helly stuff in a second, but that stuff was fascinating. Milch actually convincing Mark to come back. I love this scene as well, because again, it takes stuff that we knew and kind of learned throughout season 1 and sort of spins it and throws it back in his face a little bit, where Milchik actually just brings up that your motivation for doing this was your dead wife, and that you said your days felt like a year and it was horrible and you wanted to move on. And he basically tells Mark about how happy the inner Mark is. Any Mark is funny, he's got a sense of humor, he cares about the people around him, he's got friends. And the funny thing is, and what makes this such an effective speech, is that we know it's kind of true. He's not actually lying about any of this. Obviously there's like a context to it that he's kind of skirting around, but these statements are true. And then he tops it all off with, any Mark has actually found love. And that is the carrot that's been dangled in front of Outie Mark here, is that has any self removed from everything has possibly felt love again, something that Outie Mark can't even imagine feeling yet. And this is so beautiful, the way it lines up with Helena and Helly, because my favorite scene of the episode, by far, is Helena watching the kiss. On the security camera feed, she's watching the kiss between Helly and Mark from the season 1 finale. And watching her reaction to this was fascinating, especially since earlier on in the episode when she's doing damage control and she's doing the speech about how she was drunk and she's doing this apology. And to be honest, Helena was coming across to me as a very, very talented sociopath in that scene. And I was like, oh, she's convincing me here that she could act and have the chemistry with Mark, pretending to be an innie by just being good at this, good at lying, good at doing this stuff. But that scene where she sits down and she's watching this, and there's such a mix of, I think, the performance from Britt Lower here is stunning. Because there's a mix of what I think is jealousy, but also a more positive kind of like intrigue. I don't think she's ever felt love in the outside world. And I think this is how it really interestingly parallels Mark, is that Mark can't find love and feel love again in the outside world because he's still not over his wife's death, right? Very understandable. It's this, obviously it's tragic, but it's not, it's something that happened to him, and it's just, it's not that he, like, whereas she, on the other hand, has grown up in this rich family. And the one interaction we get with her dad, I actually have no idea what her dad said to her, but he said something to her. It was like one little phrase. Sounds came out of his mouth. I didn't recognize the words, but it felt like he was chastising her and that this was her screw up, that she had let him down. And I feel like she probably grew up with this very controlling, sociopathic father, this narcissist, probably has a lot of daddy issues, and has been effectively bred through her life to be just as cold, to be trying to impress him, to work to the interests of him and the company and whatever else, and has never been able to actually feel true connection or romance. So just like Mark, her innie was able to do something that she couldn't, because her innie doesn't have the backstory she does. The innie doesn't remember growing up with this father that was controlling, or the rich family. This is like the Helly that she could have been with reasonable circumstances, with a fighting chance of being a normal person. So in a really interesting way, you've got someone who their surroundings basically built them into a villain, if you will. Maybe that's a bit a harsh word, but a villainous type character who, when you take away all those surroundings, you find out, oh, they may actually be, the possibility of being a good person who feels things is actually there. And the temptation of, like, when will we really see Helly again if we're not already seeing her? I don't think we are. They're still playing it close to the chest. I think the ending, I thought they were going to reveal it at the end. I thought they were going to reveal that when she was getting in the elevator, that the mind wishing part wouldn't happen, and it would tell us that it was really Helena going in and just pretending to be Helly. They've not told us that yet, though. And they left it ambiguous because when, they go past that first day when Mark got the comms and demanded that his team come back, and they have the meeting and they say, we're going to have to go and get them back, and Milchik goes around with the pineapples and welcomes them all. They even turn to her and say, we have to also give him Helly R, because that's one of his conditions. Like, we need Mark to be satiated so that he can keep working on this project, because that's how important it is for the company. So them saying we need to give him Heliar, I think is there as kind of like to suggest that that it is Heliar that we're seeing, but I think that it isn't. Now, the interesting possibility though is that is she doing on the sly? Like, is Helena pretending to be Heli because they're taking less chances and that's something the company knows about? Or is she decided on her own that because she's seen this kiss with Mark that she wants to go in and actually experience it? And that in some way explains why there was still a little bit of chemistry, is because arguably in some way, if she got, say, a little bit jealous of her innie and she wants to feel those feelings, you could argue what she's doing is what they said Selvig was doing last episode, or Kolber, or Selber, whatever the brother-in-law called it. He fused the two names together. Like, could she be doing this from her own volition, right, without the knowledge of the other higher-ups in the company, because she wants to experience this? And that's interesting, right? Because that's like a rich person deciding that they're going to go live with, you know, an underprivileged community for like a period of time to see how it feels and sort of get their life experience. And is it possible that through that experience she will actually grow some empathy for other characters, for other people, and change? Or maybe it is more kind of creepy in the sense that she's maybe now fascinated with Mark and is latched onto him and wants to kind of go in and have that quote-unquote romance with him, even though now it's this kind of one-sided thing where she's pretending to be the woman that he knew before. But those motivations are fascinating. And even if it somehow is actually Heliar we're seeing, you know, on the inside right now from episode 1, like, Helena having to go knowing that she's basically letting herself go over to this other person who's better than her is kind of, because I don't think the other characters have that. I don't think, like, yeah, obviously any Mark is like in a happier place typically than Outie Mark because he doesn't have the baggage, but he's not necessarily a better or worse person morally, and that seems to be the case for the others. They're kind of, whereas with Helena, there's such a big gaping divide between who she is on the outside world and the seemingly much better person that Helly is on the inside. And what does that say about her and about how her surroundings and her circumstances built her into what she was? And that's why this show ends up feeling great to me, is when it starts making you think about like why humans are the way they are and what's separating parts of them out like this, what it says, and how important it is that each part of you is equally important, right? Ultimately, the any Mark is just as important as the outie Mark. You know, like, yeah, all that stuff is great. I loved all of this. I really can't say enough nice things about the performance here from Britt Lower. That watching the kiss scene and just all of the intrigue of what's going through her mind, how it's making her feel, this temptation to want to explore it, even if it's a little bit perverse in the way that she's exploring it. It's not so much about wanting to do it for good reasons. She's jealous and wants to feel it for herself. And it begs the question, like, because there's no way that we just never get Heliar again. It will happen again at some point. But how does it happen? Does it happen because Helena grows a conscience and chooses to let Heliar out? That would be like a cool like journey to go on if we get to that point. Or does it happen because somehow she's forced to turn back into Heliar via whatever means? So fascinating stuff. Loved it. Excited. This was as much as this was. I think on the face value, you sort of look at this episode as like answering a lot of mysteries and doing a lot of like, oh, this is how the company works a bit more, and we're seeing the outside lives. But honestly, it was all just like great character building. As much as I had some theories there about what's going on with Gemma, or Miss Casey, if you will. Like, to me, the real meat of this is the characters and the way that they're just again prodded at and advanced through this experience, and Mark and Helly especially, they really feel like they counterbalance each other and parallel each other in the story now, in different ways, and I think everything feels so rich because of that. And that's before we even get to some of the other stuff. And I love Devon's relationship with Mark. Like, I think is evolving into something pretty special at this point as well, which I really like. I did laugh at Rickon saying that, any Mark seemed to really like my book. It seemed to really inspire him. Like, him focusing on that was a little bit funny. I'll say that. Outie Irving, like finding the map with Bert's name on it and being confused by that, and then the reveal that Bert has somehow found him on the outside and is watching him, begs some questions about why he's done that. Does he remember him? Has Bert was he severed before? Was he pretending he was severed? Has he been merged, or is like one strong memory because of the romance that he felt sort of like leaking through, and he's remembering someone and is confused by it or whatever. I mean, these are all fascinating options, but we do see Christopher Walken there for a wee second watching. We do see, of course, there's a funny section with Dylan trying to get a new job before he's asked to come back at a door factory, which was a very interesting scene just for world building sake, because it showed kind of the politics and the world state of this world that has the severance procedure in it, because the employer, who's very similar to him in like sort of build and like shape and stuff, he even says, "Oh, you remind me of a young me," and it does. Like when they go to the two shot and they're on either side of the frame, it looks like it looks like someone like a son looking into their father or something, like with very similar builds and overall looks. And it's going well until he mentions he was severed, and immediately the interview goes cold, and he's basically, just let go from it. And I think it's interesting because there's a moral reason why he wants to discriminate here, right? Well, not that it's moral to discriminate, but what I mean is he thinks that the procedure's immoral and he doesn't want to hire someone for it. And Dylan argues that's discrimination, but that's a whole can of worms to unpack and talk about potentially. But I do think it's interesting though from the employer's perspective is that, you get references for a job, right, from a previous employer, and you're, people always say, people say get a degree, but it's really the experience of previous jobs and who you know that really matters. But if you're applying for a job and technically you're the one applying for the job, never actually did all the work at your past job, technically your outie has just been living the personal half of life for the last however many years. Technically, the outie that is interviewing for this next job was unemployed for several years in terms of experience, right? And I think that's an interesting angle to look at as well. I also laughed in this scene because at one point when they're debating this severance thing, he says, "Look, we're trying to hire one person, not someone who's effectively two. What do you think this is? A carpet factory?" And I'm like, whoa, what is this beef that the door makers have got with the carpet people? It made me think of Parks and Rec whenever anyone from the parts department starts shitting on the library. That's what it made me think of. And it works in that show because it's a comedy, it's a running gag. But here, this was like, whoa, dude, there's some beef here. I don't know what the carpet people did to you, but because I don't imagine that all the carpet places in this world are all severed people. I mean, why would they be? I don't understand. Anyway, so I got a chuckle out of that. I guess the other big thing in the episode, other than we see the other team get fired who were in episode 1, and Bob Balaban's not happy about it. But the big thing, of course, is we do see Selvig or Culber at the end packing away her things. And we see her earlier on as well because she's offered the promotion. And they're basically keeping her away from the severance floor, which is where she really wants to be. Why she really wants to be there and why she cares so much is still a bit of a mystery. But she kind of fights back quite a bit with Helena during that scene. And at the end of the episode, it would appear that she has either not taken the promotion or that the promotion is not in the same town. That maybe they're shipping her off to another building. I'm tempted to say she didn't take the promotion just because of the way she kind of mocked Outie Mark for like being tempted back with a pineapple. It kind of felt like she was still like it felt like she was her bridge with the company had been burned by the way she was speaking. But I could be reading in too much to that. But yeah, she's leaving at the end of the episode, and Mark like sees her and confronts her. He's mad. He's like, "Hey, I ate your shitty cookies. I let you into my house, and you all this time knew who I was from work, and you like what is going on?" And the episode ends where she tries to drive away. He jumps in front of the car so she can't, and he asks the question. I can't remember the exact phrasing, but it was like, "Is this about Gemma, or do you know something about Gemma?" Right? He says something to that effect, and she just sits there, unable to respond, clearly weighing her options, or just kind of in shock that he's asked that, and it's such a a hidden question. It's just enough that by the time she kind of screams and moves the car, and he has to jump out of the way, it's just enough that Mark should be like questioning it. Like, it's just that reaction is enough for him to think, okay, what's going on, and what has my dead wife got to do with where I work? There's something to this. Now, I'm not saying he should be believing immediately that somehow she's alive, because that's a big leap. But this was just her reaction to that question, and I think the acting on his face, on Adam Scott's face, as she takes long to answer, and you can see his face kind of like get serious as he's realizing that that question startled her, that it means something to her to ask that. That's something. It's something to hook on to. So I really, really enjoyed that moment, and it's why I don't even feel too mad that they didn't quite get there with the question about why he was holding the photograph early on, because they gave you this at the end, and it's just enough where you believe, okay, at the very least, I suspect he might be willing to talk to Devon about it again, if nothing else. But yeah, very interesting, and I hope I didn't miss anything major, but there was a lot in this episode. We were kind of darting about a lot and seeing like the different characters and what they were getting up to. But this was full of great stuff. New intro sequence as well. We didn't get one in episode 1, but this has got a new version where there's like it almost looks like a prison uniform, like the any version of Mark. Or is it the Outie version? I don't know. I'd have to go back and watch it again. But there's a whole bit where you see like Culber's head, but with like a big like window on her face. It's very creepy Twilight Zone-esque stuff going on, kind of surrealist. There's like a little baby with an old man head crawling at the end, and I'd have to go back and check who that is. Again, it was a lot to take in as I was watching this opening title sequence for the first time. A lot of details, and I think in season 1 a lot of the details made more sense the more the season went on, because you saw sort of more things it was kind of referencing. It feels like that may happen again. There is one moment though towards the end of it that really stood out, which is the camera sort of goes down a hallway to I assume is his wife. But just as you get there, it kind of flickers out, and the actual ending of the title sequence takes place. But yeah, super interesting. And and if I am right, and that Miss Casey is the any version of his dead wife, but somehow they were able to sort of like physically like get her back online, to use a weird term, or and have her any be the new personality, but they're trying to like rebuild. That becomes interesting, because is that still technically his dead wife? Like the argument's for and against. Like it is still part of her technically, but it's not the one that actually has all the memories of the marriage and the life. And what makes a person? Is it their circumstances? Is it their experiences? Or is there something true beyond those two things where you're just inherently a good person at your core, or a bad person at your core? And I think those are the questions that the show is really trying to poke at. So, oh man, it's so good to have this. But it's so good to have a show like this that's going weekly, that I'm so invested in, and it's very easy to come on and talk about this show. It's like I don't have to look for the things to talk about. Like everything's just jumping out at me is like exciting to discuss, and that's so nice. It's so nice, right? So that is the show. That is Severance for the week. Thank you very much for joining me. Anything I did sort of gloss over, by all means, bring up in the comments. What the hell did Egan say to Helena? Because I have no idea what it was. I don't have subtitles on usually, unless there's some reason why there was noise that might distract me from the audio. I won't put subtitles on, unless, of course, it's a non-English speaking thing. So thank you very much for joining me. You can support all the content over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. Get some bonuses over there. Check out the MailFuzz movies where all the movie podcasts live. But that is me, so thank you once again for watching or listening. I do appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?